All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this open session, an open board where you get to decide the topic. I just threw this up because I'm not going to presume that this is going to be massively popular on its launch. Just let me set up a little bit. Okay, we're getting ready to go. I'll let that song finish playing out and then we'll get kicked off. But what I'm going to do is leave the board open. You get to decide what goes on there. And you can see it's full. Obviously, I have something to kick off with, guys, right? I thought it would be interesting to discuss this Christ is King idea. So let's do it. Let's talk about it. Alexa, stop. That is quite enough out of you. All right. Christ is King. If you're not living on Twitter, if you don't live online, that might seem like such an innocuous and obvious thing for you to say as a Christian. However, it just so happens, this can happen quite a lot if you're not get your ear to the ground. You can do innocent things, innocuous things, such as the OK signal, etc., and you have just committed a hate crime. You didn't know that. Maybe you didn't know that the OK symbol is a symbol of white supremacy. Is it? I don't think it is, but some people think it is because when you do that, it makes a W shape for white and then a peace shape for power, apparently. And basically, that's what Christ is King is supposed to mean. Now, how do you take that? How do you receive that information? Especially if you're new to this, if you've never heard of this before, you might think to yourself, what? Why? Why is that a thing? Why are we deciding that this is true? And so I can understand that when a discussion like this begins, lots of people come to it fresh. And you don't have that background of being involved in any kind of dog whistling or any kind of counter signaling. To you, it's just an innocuous statement of the Christian faith. So when someone tells you, by the way, you're being racist when you say that, your reaction might be, no, it's not. No, it's not. Christ is King. Right? What you're doing is you're asserting your belief. You're not doubling down on the racist position. No, you're not acknowledging that. Instead, what you're doing is, now I'm going to state what I believe to be true, and that's Christ is King. So you end up reacting to the discomfort that's produced in someone telling you that this is a hateful statement. Now, what they mean to suggest to you is that there's some kind of baggage attached to that statement. And when you make that statement, it's got this particular history that you should be sensitive to. But that's lost, that the compassion, the ability to communicate and to reach you in a place that makes sense is completely lost, right? Because you might just completely reject their framing. It's like, no, I'm not going to let you frame this as some kind of hate symbol. I don't know what you're talking about. So I thought we would do a little tour of the scripture first. Is this a hateful statement? Or is it a Christian tenet? Well, Psalm 2:6 tells us that, I set my king upon Zion. of his peace, of his governance, there will be no end. We have this idea. Isaiah 9, 6-7, put him on the throne of David. And in John 18, 36-37, Christ tells us that being a king, to this end I was born. So it doesn't seem controversial in and of itself, does it? It seems to be a Christian tenet. We have in the Latin statements like Christus Rex, Christ is king. Pope Pius the 11th said the feast of Christ the King in 1925. He made that a thing. And then in Protestantism, to sort of, cut out the middleman, to kind of cut out the priesthood and the Pope, the Protestants would assert that Christ is king to sort of challenge the papacy and the bureaucracy of Catholicism. So that's why a Protestant might use that utterance. So what we're contending with is the allegation or the perception of Christ as King being some kind of far-right dog whistle, okay? And it's supposed to be said in certain circles. So I don't know if you're familiar with who Candace Owens is. She's quite popular here on YouTube. She's an American pundit, you might say. And she talks about things like conspiracy theories about the French president's wife being a man and Barack Obama's wife being a man. Basically, everybody's wife is a man and they are a lizard. Stuff like that. Who knows? Right? Who knows? I'm not here to say otherwise. I don't need that heat. I don't want Candace Owens doing a little bit on me. And then Jordan Peterson took her to task. You should know who Jordan Peterson is, big famous intellectual out of Canada. I think he stays in America now. He works with Ben Shapiro. And because there's this perception of anti-Semitism attached to the Christ is King statement, and he works for Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson grilled Candace Owens on the use of the term. But clearly motivation of heart means something in this discussion, doesn't it? So it's said that those in the far right use Christ as King as a dog whistle to oppose secularism, which I don't see as an extreme position, right? The opposition of secularism, I think, is a very spiritual thing. Opposition of multiculturalism. Again, I don't see that as a far right thing. I think there's a lot of strength to be had in a shared culture. It doesn't matter what your background is in terms of ethnicity, but it does matter what culture you're putting first, right? The culture of a Satanist and the culture of a Christian they're not compatible, right? It doesn't matter the ethnic background. So I would say these are not extreme positions. To oppose Jewish influence, to oppose pluralism. Some people see it as reactionary. And I use that term, I'll pray for you, because that's an example of where an innocuous statement, Christ is King, I will pray for you, can sometimes have a layer of menace attached to it. I'll pray for you. Oh, I'll pray for you. And it's said vindictively, right? And I think that's what they're sensing is the heat that the Jewish people are getting from this statement and the sensitivity that someone like, a Jewish American broadcaster like Ben Shapiro in the Daily Wire is sensitized toward such a statement. And it creates this reverberation and feedback loop where it's like, look, the statement Christ is King can be innocuous. Can we accept it as such? But then someone in Ben Shapiro's position might feel particularly attacked, and now he's unable to let it slide. He's unable to let it go. It becomes like a dog with a bone, and it's quite difficult to tear those things apart. They coalesce. Those coalescent bonds are strong. And some people think it has notes of this concept, supersessionism, which is the idea that Christianity supplants and replaces Judaism as the spearhead of Israel's story. So that's the kind of baggage that we're dealing with, right? that it's been co-opted by extremists and reduced to a dog whistle. And one of the examples we get is the Celtic cross, which I don't accept. There's ancient grave sites all over Scotland and Ireland with Celtic crosses in them. And to think that someone's going to take that symbol and transform it into a symbol of hatred, I see that as completely stupid. Why would I cede that ground to some hateful character? I'm not going to let that happen. This is a symbol of Christianity in Ireland and Scotland and Cornwall and Wales and even throughout England. You're not going to let that go, right? And this is where it comes over here. So it's a race against heuristics. What's heuristics? Well, that's just a term used in psychology to refer to like muscle memory or like quick access memory, right? Like in a computer, the things that it can access really quick and reflect it reflexively, just instantly. What you want to try and do is interrupt the association. You don't want it to cement into the greater public consciousness that Christ is King is a hateful statement. That doesn't seem like a particularly wise thing to allow to happen. But then again, how can you stop it if some people want to see it that way? There's very little you can do about it. All you can do is reject their reality and substitute it with your own and hope it becomes the dominant framing. I guess that's what marketing's all about. It's what politics is all about. You want to make your framing, your perception of the world, the most dominant one. You want to sell that to people. And I use more psychologically technical terms here, like to prevent the schematic integration of Christ as King, cementing into a hostile slogan. Now, when anyone makes reference to schematic integration of the mind or the sort of, because there's different ideas of a schematic. You can have a schematic, which is like a building schematic, which is kind of similar. I think schema comes from the Greek meaning form. And what we're doing is building schemas in our head like this. So bigoted slogan becomes a part of the mind. It's like a nodule in the mind. And all these things attached to it. So a bigoted slogan might be lazy Aberdonian, right? The people of Aberdeen, lazy. Stabby Glaswegian, right? The people of Glasgow, very stabby. These are bigoted statements. The people of Glasgow are not stabby. The people of Aberdeen are not lazy. The people of Edinburgh are not cheap. The people of Paisley are not toad people. The Highlanders are not puffin snatchers. And Ayrshire people are not cannibals. What are we? Come and have a visit. Visit Scotland. I'm only joking, I'm not cannibal. And then you've got in there Christ is King. It lodges into the public consciousness as a hateful, bigoted slogan. But we don't want that to happen. We don't want Christ is King there. We don't want to upset the Ayrshires, the Aberdonians, the Ouija's, the Edinburghs, Paisley people, or the Highlanders. We don't want these bigoted slogans, right? We want to delete them. So we need to detox that semantic contamination. And the power of social media is people just start blasting the message, Christ is King. But all that does is confirm to the people who affirm the negative framing, the people who see it as far right, all it's doing is affirming to them that, oh, these people are doubling down on this, they're so mean. When really all that's happening is the people who are devout and don't want to accept that framing are trying to overshout. They're trying to shout over these people saying it's a statement of hate. So really the whole thing's stupid. It's just a bunch of stupid people interacting with other stupid people. And here we are in the middle, just trying to make sense of it. And I think that's a fair assessment. So there's the board. That's what's happening, right? And let me just see here. Looks like the chat disconnected on my end. Let me just refresh this page. So I don't know what you feel about that. What do you think about Christ as King? Are you going to stop saying it? In fact, are you going to deny the Messiah's reign? There's an interesting question about that. Someone was asking about the little season. And I think one of the most powerful pieces of evidence that the little season is 66 to 70 AD is that the rule of Christ, Christ's kingship, started in the first century, around the year 30. That's when Christ was beginning his tenure as king. In the first century, at the start of his ministry, I would say at his baptism, he was anointed. The Spirit of God came down as a dove and remained upon him. That was his anointing. That was when Christ became king. So that's what we're dealing with up here. My little page never came back. Do I even have internet access? I do. Okay, so that's Christ as King. I can't see anyone's comments just now, but please do leave comments. They will go on the board. I'll put anything on this board you want. You want to say something a little dicey? You want to take a risk with me? Let's do it together. Let's put something crazy up here. Let's get cancelled tonight, guys. Let's get cancelled. Any Klansmen? And I'm only joking. let's not do that. So we'll come to the second topic of the evening before we launch into whatever the audience might want to discuss. Let me just grab my marker pens. I've ordered some new marker pens. We're going to do a video every day. Okay, this is the unstructured Sunday. We're just hanging out here. Okay, that's all that's going on tonight. We're just hanging out. So we're not taking it too seriously. Come and go as you please. But the second topic, guys, is empathy. Empathy. That's another one. If you've been living online, checking the Twitter, Christians have been debating the concept of empathy. Okay? The conservative Christians are saying, you know what? This empathy thing, people are taking it too far. Empathy can go too far sometimes, right? It can become pathological. Oh no, why am I spelling on a board live? Pathological? I can't spell anymore. Somebody spell pathological for me in the chat. Okay. You know what? It can become diseased. It can become diseased, guys. And a Trojan horse. Empathy can be used as a Trojan horse, right? Let's be really kind. Let's be really considerate to this person, guys. But really the person that's coming in is a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's going to quickly draw you a little wolf in sheep's clothing, guys. Don't even worry about it. There we go. It's got little eyes up here. It's got little ears that look like this. Is that a wolf? Is it? How am I going to depict it's in sheep's clothing? You know, it's got little shoes and then it's got this little fuzzy bit round about it. It's a wolf in sheep's clothing. Right? I'm not going to hear anything else about it. Oh, look, we have some chat. Thank you, guys. Thank you for bearing with me. We've got Christina there. Hello, Christina. Required mailbox. Good to see you, man. Since AD 70, all genealogical records were destroyed. The problem is that the world sees modern Israel as the same Jews from the Bible when they are not. Stating the facts are considered bigoted and hateful. Since 70 AD, all genealogical records were destroyed, guys. That's true. And yeah, the chat wasn't registering for me there, guys. I prefer to call him Lord, more like a landlord. Very, very good. I appreciate that. Chat. Chat is coming in really slow. I can tell, I think my internet's struggling under the strain of having two devices, one streaming and then one trying to get something of a chat going. But this is the concept we're discussing, empathy. It can go too far, some say, on the right. It can be diseased, pathological, and it can be a Trojan horse. Over here, on the left. So we'll say this is the right, right? And then on the left, they're saying that, it's actually underplayed. We need to be more empathetic. And they're accusing the right wing of being a term called parochial. And parochial empathy is just caring about your own kin, right? It's like kinship. Caring about those closest to you, right? Let's say proximity. That's what they're accusing them of, and we're accusing them. I just outed myself, guys. Just outed myself, taking sides on this one. See these leftist clowns. See these demon rats, these Democrats. I'm only joking, guys. That's not what I'm saying. It's not what I'm saying. But I do think there's an unfair analysis going on here. Just like the Christ is King thing, people miss the point. Firing cannons at each other, right? Ships passing in the night is the terminology usually here. Pathological. Yeah, I said patho. That's the thing when you speak with an accent, you doubt yourself when you start writing on a whiteboard. That's a very early lesson you'll learn if you're ever a teacher. You start to, how do you spell seagull again? How many L's in gull? I made that mistake one time. Very embarrassing. Guys, what do you think? What does the chat think about empathy, right? Because my take on it is that there is indeed a form of empathy that is quite pathological. You can become gaslit. You can become susceptible to deception by people playing on your empathetic nature. It kind of correlates to naivety, right? And on this side of the fence, you're more guarded against naivety, but you might also risk becoming calloused, okay? And you don't want to become calloused. You want to be sensitive enough that your empathy is effective and there aren't stumbling blocks before you in practicing and demonstrating the fruits of the Spirit. But certainly, you don't want to be gullible and so malleable that you lose focus on the things that are primary and take precedent and are important. Like there is some wisdom in parochial empathy. It's good to have your own house in order before you tell other people how to order their own. I like political engagement. I enjoy politics, but I know for me personally, while I might consider myself something of a wise young man, I'm not where I need to be to start dictating terms. I can have vision, yeah, but I can't really step out in full confidence when there's things at home I know I could be doing better. And until I've perfected those things, which isn't a, chasing the dragon thing, there's just small things I know I could correct and get right. Until I've achieved those goals, I'm not going to presume to tell other people how to, pursue their goals, which I sometimes feel the left are not so good at. I think that's why the left lost the election in America, is because they were too grandstanding. And I don't think many Americans resonate with that. Coastal Americans, well, there's a more European vibe in California and New York, but I think the true kind of distilled American spirit doesn't like people telling it what to do. Indeed, there was a little thing called the treason of independence in 1776. You guys, why did you do that? I'm only joking. I've got nothing to say about that as a Scotsman. I don't really. I'm genetically designed to hate the English. I'm only joking. That's not true. They actually have a lot of time and love for English people and all people. I don't buy into the scripts that the world hands me. I'm invested in God and the kingdom, and there are no ethnicities or nationalities or divisions there. We're all children of the light, right? We're all one. I find it so silly where people get drawn into these battles. Oh, Rangers versus Celtic, Catholic versus Protestant, Shiite versus Sunni, Jew versus Arab, Masonic Lodge versus Scientology. It's like, guys, we don't need to be having these fights, because true empathy doesn't just aim downward, it aims upward. Guys, it aims upward into the heavenlies, where it gets its sustenance. I like the larger writing. Jackie, I'm going to try and stick to the larger writing. Sometimes I get sometimes I'm struggling to keep all the detail on the board that I want. And so I'll get tiny with my writing, but that doesn't do anyone any favors because you can't really appreciate it. Empathy is scary because you can take on others' depression and problems. So you'll have to guard yourself a bit. And Required Mailbox says it depends on the circumstances. And Jackie, don't worry, I don't hate the English. I love the English. I married an English woman and then divorced her because I hated, only joking, but I was very young. We ran away, we eloped, and it didn't make any sense. We're still good friends to this day. Just a little bit of history there. It's really just about being in the darkness or the light. It really is, man. It really just devolves down to that. I find that, see all this political divide stuff and everything else. See the example I gave you about Christ is King and how you've got ships firing in the night. Like, they build a backstory for each other about why they should hate one another, when really the opposition doesn't adhere to that backlog, to that story that you've just made up. That presumption you've made about how they got to where they are and what they are actually doing. You're just told algorithmically that these people are the enemies because, look, they're saying Christ is King. That means they're the enemy. That means they're bigots. That means they hate this person, hate that people when they need to be stopped. When the truth is, they don't know any of that stuff. All they know is what people hate Christ is King is a statement. Oh, the bastards, Christ is King. That's all that's happening. And then they'll see, oh, look, he just did this. He's hailing Hitler and he's saying Christ is King. It's like, no, none of that's happening. People just like to make stuff up. Why? Because they love lies. Ladies and gentlemen, they're outside the kingdom. They're in the darkness. They can't see what's happening, and all they can hear is the gnashing of teeth. Ladies and gentlemen, you step into the kingdom, suddenly you've got friends everywhere. Friends across the bench. Friends of every political ideology. The ones who just use a particular ideology for its goodness because they believe there's some goodness. If everyone was benevolent, every political ideology would work. Tyranny would work. Communist dictatorships would work if everyone was a benevolent angel and made really good informed choices based on the precipice of wisdom. Yeah. The problem is we're human beings and we don't do that because it's impossible. We're full of problems and issues, and it's better not to believe the hubris, to believe, oh wait, I'm the one that's going to get it right. I'm the one tyrant that's going to be good for the world. Because that, again, relinquishes true self-appraisal. As soon as you believe you're above moral vice, you concede true self-scrutiny. And that's not a good thing to do. So yeah, Jonathan's in there saying, I'm not sure there's one answer. Clearly, there are good ways. Crying with those who cry, but tolerance of sin is bad. I haven't thought much about empathy, to be honest, so I don't have much of an opinion. Jonathan, I would advise you do your homework. Only joke. There was no homework exercises. And to be honest with you, you've actually said a lot there. You've said a lot. Because I agree with you. I don't think there is an easy answer. Clearly, there are good ways, crying with those who cry, but tolerance of sin is bad. And it's just like, what Jackie was saying there, empathy's scary because you can take on others' depression and problems, so you'll have to guard yourself a bit. This is what I love about everyone in the chat right now has heart, because you guys are not even engaging. Because what was the mistake that Eve made? Eve engaged with the devil. Eve, the serpent, which we're conflating with the devil. But Eve engaged. Christ didn't engage. The Satan said, "It is written," and then Christ would just say, "No, again, it's written this way." It also says, "Is it not also written, man shall not live by bread alone?" So you guys are not even engaging with Satan. So let me rub Satan off the board. What you guys are saying is, look, you want to be there for someone, right? A little lovely heart. And someone's upset, right? You want to give them love. But you want to make sure that the outcome of that is abundant love, right? What you don't want to do is have this plus this equals that. Right, guys, it's a scientific formula. Right, so we want to make sure we get this one here, right? We want to make sure we get A and not B. Guys, how can we make sure we get A? How can we get to A and not fall into B? That's maybe a good one for the audience to workshop some of that stuff. Tolerance of sin in your own camp is bad. Tolerance of sin outside the camp is how the world is, right? You are. Yep, and B happens a lot too. Yeah, so tolerating sin outside the camp is how the world is, okay? So you have the world, right? This is the world. This is the word. This is the world over here. This is the world. And then I think to draw this appropriately, it's difficult because the kingdom would be like this. I think the kingdom would be like this, guys. I'll tell you why. Because you're in the world, not of the world. So this is us here, okay? And then this is the kingdom. So the kingdom is a transcendent realm. So it's not just in the world, but it intersects with the world. So this is us here, okay? And this might be the world. This could be the sinful world, right? Where there's sin. And this is the good place, right? The Netflix show, The Good Place. Ted Danson. You probably watch that. Somebody probably watches that in the audience. It reminds me of how I've heard that trying to rescue a drowning person can be dangerous if they don't want to be rescued. Perhaps it's similar in this case. I think so. If you dive into those choppy waters and you're not prepared, it can certainly do this. I think it's very human to make this mistake, and I think it's an important lesson for us all. Every one of us will know there's a situation that we're immediately unqualified to help fix. Someone made the example of you get on a bus or you get on a train and you sit down beside someone and they're talking to voices in their heads and just out of it. You know that you're not qualified to deal with that situation. You can't contend with it, but you're so close to it in that moment, right? And you knew if you engaged it, it might end up dragging you down. It might not even necessarily make you sad. It might make you unconscious because they might smack you. You never know. But certainly this can happen. I think this is a bit harsh. I don't think in this context it necessarily makes sense, but there's something about peril before swine. I know that sounds particularly harsh, but I think there's a subtlety to this idea of peril before swine, right? Maybe there's a better example in the biblical text for the concept I'm trying to describe, but if you try to be delicate with someone who's indelicate, there can be a true, discomfort that comes about through that. There can be a ruckus, right? Like it can be a bit tumultuous, right? So what are we talking about? What is the situation in a parental friendship? These are the kind of outcomes. You're going to have this outcome more often than not. If it's a parent, like an older parent, I know older children can be a lot to deal with. Like, if our adult children present problems, then you're basically just dealing with another adult at that point. But if you've got a young child, this is going to be the outcome. If you've got a young child, if you've got a friendship, like if you're 10 years older than someone, like I am, I've got friends that are 10 years younger than me, then you're going to probably get this outcome here because, 10 years, I've got a lot of wisdom on someone who's 26, right? I'm going to know how to help them in ways I couldn't if I was also 26. This is more likely to be the outcome if I'm trying to help someone who's 46, has a family, has kids, and I don't have those things, and I'm trying to help him out. His problems, he can't deal with his problems. He's going to be so much more resourceful than me. And if I try to get under the weight of that yoke, I might end up like this. It might just be the case of I'm not that guy. It doesn't mean I shouldn't care. It just means perhaps I'm putting myself in there when I should maybe take a step back and pray for him. So it's about the approach, like some people say in the chat there. It's about the context of the situation, right? So how does that land with you guys? I think I've said something that makes sense there. Yeah. Rescuing the drowning person. I think that's a good one. The holies of holies are in our hearts now, which is a part of heaven. Well, that's good. We've got the holy of holies within us, right? Holy plus or holy squared, right? And we have that within us. We can bring that into the world and hopefully shine a light on the world of sin. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So the Holy of Holies, as it is in heaven, right? We could take heaven as the Holy of Holies, right? So thy will be done. That little room within the temple that's so secluded away, let's have that inside us, okay? So that the will of God is done, not just in this little sequestered area in the kingdom in Jerusalem, but is within all of us. And so we can shine the light of that temple because there is no need of the sun in the kingdom. For the light in the kingdom is God and the Messiah. And they shine day and night. And we have to bring that light into the world. So there's an elegance to that. I like how that comes across. And I think we can see the distinction here. So it might just be a case of, like some people say about the example of drowning, you have to diagnose the situation before speaking. So yeah, let's put that up there. We're still on the topic of empathy. Diagnose the problem. Empathy. And the good thing about diagnosing the problem is you'll find out if you have the resources, right? Do you have the resources necessary to deal with that situation? What I used to say in a group session in the rehab, because I worked with addiction, and what I would say is, when you go into a 28-day stint in a rehab, some of the best advice you're going to get doesn't come from a fancy professor or psychiatrist. It comes from the alcoholic sitting beside you. And the reason that happens is not because the psychiatrist doesn't have insightful things to say and medications to hand out. It's because the person sitting beside that individual has experiences and a particular way of communicating, a particular way of being that makes them uniquely revelatory. They can reveal things that I can't. I could have as many degrees in this. I've got a degree in alcohol and drug studies, degree in sociology, a degree in psychology, a degree in teaching. It doesn't mean a damn thing. It doesn't mean a damn thing if the message can't come from me, right? God had prophets. If Isaiah is standing beside me, he's going to have the word of God. I could blabber all night, but he's the one that has the word of God. as much as that might frustrate me, and it shouldn't, I should celebrate, the office of my brother, and I should be, happy to hear the word and recognize that as a privilege in itself. But sometimes wisdom comes from particular voices. So it's not just about having the resources. It's also a question of calling. That idea of calling. You can swim. Can you swim before you jump to help? Familiar circumstances in the past. Yeah, that's a good one as well. Have you been in familiar circumstances? Is it familiar circumstances? Can you swim? These ideas are related, right? Can you swim? Can you get in there? Is it your first rodeo? Well, maybe don't jump on the most buckingest of broncos if it's your first rodeo, right? Like we talked about supernatural evil the other day. I've never experienced an exorcism, I don't think. Certainly been around some dodgy behavior. But if I knew that there was a possession happening for certain, I'm not the man for the job. Because obviously I'm sitting here from a perspective of skepticism, so I don't really know if it still happens. And if it did happen, and it happens in the way that Hollywood depicts, clearly my inexperience betrays a certain, naivety and novice sort of unfamiliarity. It just doesn't make sense. I'm not familiar with those circumstances. I can't swim. I don't have the resources, and it's not my calling, right? So what happens if I walk into an exorcism is everyone's getting possessed. Everyone is getting possessed. No, not necessarily, right? But at the same time, it ain't my office. What I would do is turn to someone who has like multiple years of experience, and then they can deal with that, right? That makes sense to me. So empathy is a big one. And Christ being king. Yeah. I think my conclusion on the Christ is king thing is it's not really something I say. Like Jackie, I tend to say Christ is Lord. It's not natural for me to say Christ is king. It's not a natural statement. Somebody will take a sound clip of that. He just said it's not natural for him to say Christ is king. He's just revealed himself, guys, as apostate. It's like, no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying linguistically, in terms of common parlance, the utterance, the noise, the mechanical sound, Christ is king, isn't something I would say a lot. It's like Christus Rex. No one says Christus Rex. No one says that. You've never heard those words before in your life. Okay, maybe you have, but I haven't. Christus Rex. So you wouldn't, look down your nose at me because I don't say Christus Rex. Well, it's the same thing with Christ is king. There isn't a single statement in the Bible, Christ is king. It definitely indicates that Christ is king in the Bible, but it never said that the words Christ is king don't appear in the Bible sequentially in that statement. You're going to find an example where it does say that, right? But I don't think it does. I'm pretty certain it doesn't. But it does say Christ is Lord. Doesn't it? I think so. I'm pretty sure I'm right about this. The idea that Christ is Lord is so much more pervasive. It's so much more part of the social milieu. It's common parlance, right? People say Christ is Lord. They don't say Christ is King. That doesn't mean I won't say that. Again, if it becomes a pissing contest, I will say it. I'll say it so loud, you'll see. But what I'm not doing is making all the little dog whistly far right comments. You know what I mean? That's not what happens. And I don't think for most people that's what's happening. It's just the ship's in night. But the empathy question, I think we deal with that quite sensitively and quite maturely. Really good, heartful interaction there with you guys. I think you understand that there's a certain patience and self-reflection necessary in dishing out empathy and dealing with empathy. We don't want to jump into choppy waters to rescue someone who's drowning if we can't swim. So there's certain experiential qualification that comes with it. There's a practical skill set that cannot be taught and needs to be lived. So the people who have the most lived experience might have the most adeptness with empathy. And some people get that really young. Some people go through some stuff quite young and will be well versed to deal with particular circumstances. You don't want to spread yourself too thin because, we have the example of the church being a body of different parts, okay? Not everyone's the eyes, not everyone's the mouth, not everyone's the ears, not everyone's the strong arms. Each part of the body of Christ has its particular place, its particular role. And I feel like we got there quite naturally through a discussion on empathy. Isn't it interesting how these things naturally rise to the surface? A modern preacher might call you a blasphemer for saying Christus Rex. Oh yeah, if a modern preacher heard me say Christus Rex, they would think, oh look, he's saying Jesus is a dinosaur. It's like Jurassic Park was literally about the second coming. Jonathan says, based on my duct tape etymology, it seems like empathy is made of emulate and pathos. So it seems like it's more to do with crying with those who cry than trying to help them. I like that. I like that expression, duct tape etymology. I think that's really cool, man. Right, so it seems like empathy is made of emulate and pathos. That's beautiful, man. That's poetry. You know what I mean? You're a natural poet. It seems like it's to do with crying with those who cry more than trying to help. And that's a common mistake that I've heard in relationship advice. I don't know, women, tell me if this is true, but I've heard it said that when women sometimes share a problem, what they want to see in their partner is that they acknowledge their suffering, that they acknowledge the problem that they're dealing with. And the mistake that men make is trying to troubleshoot it and problem solve it in the moment. And I've certainly made that mistake in the past where a woman will share a problem with me that I'm in a relationship with, and I'll immediately start troubleshooting. What's the problem? All right, let's work on a solution then. Come on, let's go. And the woman's like, no, this is not mechanical. I don't need an engineer right now. I need someone to listen to me. And I think that's where there is the complementary natures of man and woman, because it's not enough for a man in that instance to kind of roll their eyes and be like, oh, fucking women, right? What they like. And I'm not saying all women are necessarily like this, but it seems like there's a lot of women out there who recognize this problem, that certain men, if they lean too hard into their masculinity, will fail to meet a woman where she is. And, I grew up in a household with two brothers. It's a very male energy household, which I think is a shame, because I think as a father, it could be helpful to learn this lesson, because if you've got daughters, then you can help your daughter, you can engage with your daughters on a different level. Like a relationship between a father and a daughter can be this beautiful thing where you learn a lot, instead of just being like a Spartan. Like my dad was like a Spartan, and he raised us in a Spartan way. Like he threw me off a cliff when I was an infant. I crawled back. But I think there's a beautiful sensitivity there. And it's not something like, there's this idea that Andrew Tate and commenters like that look down their nose at femininity. But I'm not even sure that's true. I don't know a lot about Andrew Tate and all that stuff. But I know they play a character. What you need to know about life is everything is pro wrestling. Everybody's doing a shoot. Everybody's cutting a promo, they call it. Everybody's talking to camera. I'm going to get you, brother. Right? That's what everybody's doing, that to sell a product. That's what Andrew Tate's doing. He's selling a product as a character. But I think I've seen little snippets of him where he does say something that's suggestive of some kind of sensitivity and some kind of, like, he knows what he's doing, right? He's in on the joke on some level. But who knows? Apparently, they may have done some nefarious stuff. Don't need to get into that. Yeah. Let's see what we got here, guys. I'm just getting some comments in now without context, like look for a gas leak. If you walk into a room filled with possessed people, just silently pray to yourself and watch them change their demeanor. That's an interesting one. I don't know why I'm just getting these messages, but yeah, they're coming up now. Christina says, God did an amazing exorcism one night while we were in prayer and worship. We weren't qualified. We didn't do it, but it was absolutely the power of God. If you want to hear about it, I'll send an email. Certainly, I'll take a testimony on the power of God and the influence of God. We just spoke a lot this week about the malleability of human character, and we talked about the definition of a demon being, is it an angel? Is it a wandering spirit? Or is it the restless dead interfering with, the living human being? And so, the scope of deliverance that can be had there, powerful thing. I believe Jesus cried for his children. Yeah, Jesus cried, it's powerful words. I heard people using the term as a meme, Jesus wept, because it's such a powerful little soundbite. I heard people saying that before I read it in the Gospels, that Jesus wept about his friend Lazarus. And powerful testimony, right? It's a very powerful testimony. What exactly does that mean? I've never heard anyone say life is pro wrestling. Yeah, man, everything's a shoot. I don't know why I'm calling it a shoot. I think a shoot in pro wrestling is where it's actually not kayfabe. I'm using other terms now. So what is kayfabe is where it's a script. A shoot is where you go off script. But when I use that, I'm using it in a bastardized way, just to refer to cutting a promo that's got a bit of spice to it. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. That's the humanity of Christ right there, required mailbox, yeah. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. Jesus wept. Yeah. I mean, that's a powerful statement. It's a powerful statement to put on the board. It was something that the authors of the gospel wanted to communicate. What do we think of this statement then? And tell me what you think about this. Can anyone think of a scripture that communicates the mirth of Jesus, the levity of Jesus? Why are we told this? And why are we not told this? Do you think there's a reason for that? Do you think there's a certain sobriety in this? There's a proverb in the Hebrew scriptures and the Psalms that says it's better to attend a funeral than to attend a party. And I just wonder if that mentality influenced the flavour of the gospel. So this is much more of the character and disposition. It's better to attend a funeral than to attend a party. But then when the Pharisees and the scribes and the self-righteous people of the day were condemning Jesus, they called him a drunkard that hangs out with prostitutes. Is it possible for Jesus to have befriended prostitutes and people that enjoy a drink without having a sense of humour? Like, if you approach a prostitute and you don't have any charm about you, are they just not going to walk away? Now, you could say, well, look, there's a supernatural element at play here. There's destiny and calling. Christ doesn't need to be a comedian, right? But I'm just curious, what do you think that means? Why is the scripture so sober sounding? Or is it just that we interpret it to be rather sober? Let's see. Linda McMahon is head of the Department of Education. Is definitely WCW. That was a weird one. Linda McMahon, head of education. I mean, you have to respect the loyalty that Donald Trump has towards the McMahons. And Vince is certainly going through the ringer right now for his past of being a bit debauched. I don't know if he can come back from that. I believe in redemption for everyone. But yeah, he needs to pay penance for that, I'm sure. So, Jesus wept. We don't hear so much about the fact that Jesus laughed. And I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. Is that just a snippet of the zeitgeist of the time? Is that the flavor of the culture? Better to be sober-minded and shed a tear than to be unserious and laughing. But often it's human nature to respond to hardship with mirth, with gallows humour. You want to find someone that's giddy, go and speak to a nurse in palliative care. You want to find someone that's a psychopath, speak to a surgeon. That's like, if you want to be around hardship, usually it needs to be complemented with a sense of humour. So I would imagine that Jesus has a sense of humour, and that what's communicated in the gospel is just the information necessary to communicate covenant change, Israel's story. And because it's a time of judgment that's happening, there probably wasn't a lot of opportunity to add comedy to it, right? It would be weird if the Gospels were, full of laughter and full of comedy. It's a time of persecution. There's a great tribulation happening. And these are the days of vengeance, that all things written shall be fulfilled. Haha. You know what I mean? It's just, you're not really going to get too much comedy out of that. But at the same time, we acknowledge that Christ is a human being with the sensibilities of a man, and so likely told a joke or two. Let me just check my battery power on this old thing right here. I've still got 37%, not bad. So, guys, you're going to have to give me something. You're going to have to give me some material. I'm about to write Linda McMahon on this board, okay? I mean, you got to help me here. You got to stop me from doing this. Okay. Life is WWE Pro Wrestling. Come on, guys. Help a brother out here. Help a brother out. Okay. So it has character work. It's got battles in it. Victory and defeat. Okay. What else? What else, guys? It's pro wrestling. It's up to you. You put something in the chat that you want me to write on this board, and it goes up. Right? It could be anything in the board. I'll write the most despicable things on this board. Right? You tell me what you need. Tell me what you need to see on this board, and it goes up. But I use this analogy a lot. I use it for politics. Whenever a politician is speaking to you, you need to just imagine The Rock, Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, whoever the wrestling personality is of your generation, just cutting a promo into the camera. Right? That's what they're doing. And a lot of these big mega church pastors, that's what they're doing too. So that's something that comes to mind as well. The mega church. Often, if you were to talk about psychopathy. And the top jobs that attract psychopaths, and I can't tell that you guys probably are leaving messages, and this just isn't working for me. Weirdly, a chef, a surgeon. Some people say CEOs. Some people think that's grossly exaggerated. And a minister, like a pastor. Some people say that. All right, guys, I'm starting to get the messages now. His empathy is why he came to save us. God is hilarious. He does funny things all over the Bible. He does, doesn't he? You know, one of the funniest things God did in the Bible was made a donkey speak. I find that, like, the guy's beating the donkey to move forward, and he doesn't realize there's an angel that's in front of him. Interesting, right? When we come to talk about invisible celestial beings, wandering spirits, and the restless dead, is it an angel? Can you confirm that in the chat? Was it an angel that confronted? I can't tell you who it was at this point. It's the name of him, can't get it. But whoever it was, they're walking with this donkey. The donkey sees the angel, stops, and the guy's whipping the donkey. And the donkey just turns around and says, "Hey, wait a minute. Okay, I have just saved your life. You take a step forward. There's a bloody angel that's going to take your head off." And he's like, "Whoa, sorry, donkey. You got a little bit of attitude there. Donkey." That's my Shrek impersonation for you. Yep, we get humor from God. True, I think it has to do with the nature of the literature and the message being communicated. The story isn't a comedy. Required mailbox. That sucks. His chats are taking so long to go through. Yeah, no, man, that does suck. The soberness versus silliness could be related to in Proverbs, where it says that refutation from a wise man is better than the songs of fools. Ooh, refutation from a wise man. From a wise man. Better than the songs of fools. There's a concept we're going to visit. A mathematician isn't discussing humor. So you don't find humor in a math textbook. It doesn't mean the author has never told a joke. That's very wise, man. Very wise. Check out a platypus. Balaam. Yeah, that's right. Oh, listen to you. You're a genius. You've got this stuff immediately accessible. The man's an encyclopedia. Yeah. Yeah, the angel of the Lord is before Balaam. Okay. There's a Satan to Balaam. Oh, good language. A Hasatan, right? An obstacle, an adversary. Numbers 22. Yeah, so Balaam and the dog. Hold on. Am I back? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? That is so funny. Right, so that microphone I was using ran out of battery. Isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting that I became quiet as soon as we spoke about Numbers 22? Because in that episode, God made a donkey speak. But here, God made a donkey shut his mouth, eh? Woohoo! Guys, that's actually quite funny. God does have a sense of humor. God does have a sense of humor. There I was talking about the episode where God made a donkey speak. And then I'm sitting here trying to talk about the donkey, and then God shuts me up. God's in the chat. Where two or more are. Christ is also. I think Christ is here having a giggle with us tonight, ladies and gentlemen. That doesn't happen in other channels. Only in the Willie T whiteboard sessions does Jesus show up and have a bit of a laugh with us. Sorak of Satan. Could you expand on that? Sorak of Satan? That sounds like an interesting term. I'm not sure if I'm familiar with that. Right, now my thing's going slow. Take it. This is still, yeah, it still works. Right, it's still going okay. It might be a little slow coming in with the messages. I'm in the process of saving up for a new computer. There's lots of places in the UK that will build a computer for you, but it's very expensive. But I found a really good place that does it on a budget. So it's like an i7 Intel Core with a 5070 graphics card. If that means anything to anyone, you know that's okay. That's doing okay for a computer. So that should work out. I'll let that refresh on the screen before I'll see your messages again. If I go around to the back of the camera, I'll get your messages a lot quicker. But yeah, so I'm talking about the Angel of the Lord. We're talking about this episode here. It has something of comedic value to it. It certainly does. We're kind of touching on the mega church a little bit. We'll synthesize all these ideas together. We're going to make a sermon out of this stew. You ever heard of that parable about all the people who bring their ingredients to the soup? Yeah, what does that Sorak of Satan mean? I built my PC a few years ago. I just keep upgrading it. Yeah, required mailbox. That takes a particular competency that I don't quite have just yet. My older brother was really good at building PCs. I'm not so good at it, but I think I could probably get my head around about it. I want to get like a nice new motherboard, right? Because depending on the motherboard, you know what? It's a technical chat. We'll do a PC chat tomorrow. So the refutation of the wise is better than the songs of fools. And you know, it's interesting. There's a Scottish politician who once said, "I care not who writes the laws of the land, and I'd rather you let me write the songs." And the reason he said that, you probably could guess, because he felt like, if I can write the songs, right? If you let me write the songs, then I become the culture. And if I become the culture, I can have political capital. So there's a certain manipulation that can go on if you write the songs, but it's also more expedient to have the refutation of the wise and not to despise people who would correct you, because I've made that mistake in my youth. Not as much. I'm not actually that much of a Balaam. I think I'm quite receptive to wisdom. I'm not a particularly proud person. So I would take the refutation of the wise, but certainly there's been times where I've kind of felt it was not something I wanted to hear, and then ended up doing something stupid. Like I broke my jaw in 3 places because, you know, when the wrestlers tell you not to try this at home, well, I said, I don't care what you got to say, Rob Van Dam. I'm going to jump off the top of a fence, dive into the sky, try and land a 5-star frog splash, miss the mattress, hitting the mattress with my lower body, and my chin just smashed into the ground. And I broke my jaw here, broke it off here, and broke it off here. And they never reattached it. My jaw was never reattached on the hinges. I think it was broken in such a way that it just required a little bit of manipulation there. And they put a metal plate in my chin. So that didn't, and it broke some of my teeth as well. Like my molars got cracked, and they just had to put fillings in. So that was stupid, right? That was the Song of Fools, right? I was just listening to the Song of Fools, the siren song of, oh, hey, come and do this dangerous thing. Whereas the people with experience and wisdom had told me not to do it. But I considered myself wise in my own eyes, and I suffered the consequences. And that's a powerful lesson, bloody well hurt. Shake the Stars from the Sky. Hello, hello. Johnny says, 2 other thoughts for your stew. In Proverbs, it also says not to sing to someone who is sad. And also, when a face is sad, a heart can be happy. That's interesting. So when a face is sad, a heart can be happy. And not to sing to someone is sad. And that kind of reminds me of the book of Job, right? I kind of feel like Job's friends were trying to sing in some way. You know what I mean? They were trying to make light of the scenario in some way. A world banker. Okay. A good song lasts longer than a government. Wow, nicely said, man. The Doors was CIA, the Beatles was MI5 influenced. I've heard about that, about the Doors, because the lead singer of the Doors, his dad was in military intelligence. And it seems like a big coincidence that quite a few of these artists had parents who were military and intelligence officers. And so people suspect that there might have been some jiggery-pokery going on. However, someone else made the point that it might just be a rebellious spirit. Oh, my dad's in the military, so I'm going to become a rock and roll artist. And also the fact, the coincidence of them also possessing talent, because you could be a military intelligence officer and try and make your son a pop star, but he's crap. But then also, is it really that impossible to affect the sound of the Doors? I mean, what's the sound of the Doors? People are strange when you're a stranger. Is that the Doors, right? I mean, that's not really that. Whoa, it's blew my mind. It blew my mind, man. Is that the Doors? People are strange when you're a stranger? I think it is. So the angel of the Lord, guys, let's identify the angel of the Lord. Work on that case for me, right? Work on that case. How am I going to make this? How are we going to make this into a sermon, guys? How do we do it? Why did I write these random things? So these are certain occupations, right? Certain occupations. And we're saying that these occupations attract psychopathy. Now, you can have psychopathic traits without being a full-on psychopath. The full-on psychopath is quite a fantasy. I don't know if there even is technically such a thing as the romanticized idea of a psychopath. It's more, I mean, you do get people that really lack compassion, but we don't know if that's an interaction between like some kind of comorbidity. So you're autistic plus low empathy, and it's situational and environmental as much as it is biological and inherited. So it's just like a confluence that comes together to create a perfect storm that can be grown out of. A great example of that is the Axe Apologetics, Dr. David Wood. He often criticizes Islam. He was a sociopath. I guess technically is a sociopath, but he's now married. He's got 4 children. One of them passed away recently because I think he had 2 children with severe health issues, but he was there for them. He supported them. He helped them. He has a heart, and he has a little Tin Man on his shelf because the Tin Man wanted a heart. And so David Wood has that Tin Man as a symbol that's important to him because he was a man without a heart who prayed for one and got a beautiful family. So, yeah, there's something to be said about psychopathy. I don't think it's an immutable position, but these people here would say are the lover. But oh my god, I don't mean to lover of lies. That's really cruel of me to say that. If you're a chef, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a lover of lies. And surgeons, we need surgeons. Surgeons are wonderful people, and CEOs are important, and ministers are important too. But it's because these are important roles, right? Here's a crown, right? That's a crown. It might not look like one, but that's as a crown. And they don't want the crown, the bad people, right? So there's good ones, right? There's saints and sinners among them, okay? And the sinners want the crown from man. The saints want the crown from God, okay? That's what's going on there. And oh my goodness, guys, I feel like Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I don't think I'm going to make this work. Right, let's see what we're at here. Job's friends were asshats. Yeah, man, I'll go with that. Job reads wild now once I realized Satan was a human priest going in and out of the holiest of holies. Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting take. I hate when Christians quote Job's asshat friends thinking they have a good point. Yeah, it sure does. Yeah, so that's an interesting one about poor counsel, right? This, you know what I said I was going to say? Asshat friends. Asshat friends are the types of people that produce the songs of fools. And when you start to dance to the beat and the rhythm of the songs of fools, it's a practice called the blind leading the blind. You begin to fall into deception, just like Eve, who engaged with the serpent. You start to engage with a echo chamber of foolish prattle, and that can derail your sanctification. It doesn't really necessarily derail your sanctification. It complicates your sanctification. It complicates your relationship to God in a way that might be necessary for you. I mean, who hasn't had a group of people round about them that were once friends that were kind of asshatty? I did. I had a group of friends that put me in the hospital and knocked me unconscious for 10 minutes. They didn't mean to do it. They didn't mean to do it. But we're all friends. We're on a frozen lake. And I saw one of them was slide tackling people. And I thought, that's kind of silly and funny, I guess. And then next thing I know, I'm asleep. And all I can see is the grey of closed eyes. If you close your eyes, I'm just seeing that. Well, that's all I can see. And I'm thinking to myself, why am I asleep? And then all I hear is my friends, William, are you okay? William. I'm like, something's happened to me. You know, if I could describe that situation to you, I'm quite anxiety prone. Zero anxiety. Zero. It was almost like the part of my brain that could sense and produce anxiety just wasn't working. And I was just pure consciousness. I was just thinking. I was just like, something's happened to me. I can tell. All right. Well, at least I can comprehend what they're saying to me, so it might not be that bad. And then once I opened my eyes and I actually couldn't speak. When I started to talk, I was like, I was trying to say what happened, and I couldn't communicate. But that fixed itself after a couple of minutes. You have to wonder if there was some divine intervention involved in these situations in your life, because I mean that could have killed me. I went from standing up at 6 feet tall to having my legs swiped out and bashing my head here, and this whole side of my head hurt. Apparently, I stood back up and went, I'm okay, and then had a seizure and fell back down, hitting my head twice. Now, if you fall down and hit your head on solid ground twice, that's not good. And I was dizzy for about 2 weeks, but I healed up completely. So praise be to God for that. Jeez, But that's a little story about ass hat friends for you. That happens. It has real life consequences, and some of you might have even fared worse than me. You know, it's not a good thing to happen. I'm not sure what you mean by who is the angel of the Lord. He's an angel, right? Yeah, Johnny. Johnny, sorry, that was very informal of me. Can I call you Johnny? No, I like Jonathan. It's fine. I guess what I'm trying to identify here, Jonathan, is the angel of the Lord Jesus, because that is a common Trinitarian refrain. Do you think that the angel of the Lord is Jesus, or is it a celestial being? Celestial being, by which I just mean what we commonly refer to as an angel. Or is it just some dude? And the Bible calls some dude an angel of the Lord sometimes. What do you think about that, Jonathan? Have I just blown your freaking mind, Jonathan? Let me know. Does he mean the Lord sent his angel, or that he was there himself in spiritual form? That's a good question, Jackie. Depends on the context. If the angel messenger just appears, then it's Jesus. If they come from the temple, it's harder to tell if it was a priest or an angelic being. Okay. I believe the angel of Yahweh was a pre-incarnate word, or Yeshua. Very interesting, guys. Maybe that's what made you a crazy preterist. Jonathan, how dare you, sir? I'd do it too. Yeah. Genesis 16, Hagar encounters the angel of the Lord and calls him God who sees me. Ah, okay. Genesis 16, God who sees me. And I wonder, is that then a reference to what the angel is, or is it a reference to what the angel represents? Is this, is it describing, you know, the tangible or the qualitative experience? It's an interesting one, interesting question to pose. Genesis 32, Jacob wrestles a man, later identified as God, and named the place Peniel, saying, I have seen God face to face. Genesis 32. That's an interesting one, isn't it? Jacob, Israel. My handwriting's bad. Israel just means wrestled with God, isn't it? Or wrestles with God, or God is an obstacle. So Jacob becomes Israel, which means he wrestles with God. And then, because I want to break these down because these sound impressive. Judges 13, Manoah and his wife encounter the angel of the Lord, and Manoah exclaims, we shall surely die because we have seen God. Judges 13. Seen God. Absolute gems. Maybe a ventriloquist priest. I've completely lost the context of that. You just sound schizophrenic in there, Jackie. you're just shooting out ventriloquist priest at me. I'm only joking. I've never heard that before. I'd have to read the book again to have an opinion. Moses, Joshua, and the 60 elders ate the angel of the Lord. My goodness, I never saw that in the Bible. Abraham ate with the angel of the Lord too. Why are most preterists reluctant to accept revelation as inner past? Don't have the reference, but Samson, parents say they have seen Yahweh and lived. Very interesting, guys. So there's a new question coming out there about revelation. We'll deal with that next. So the angel of the Lord is often seen as a pre-incarnate word. Something very close to God. And we have good evidence to believe this because we have it in Genesis 16. God who sees me, I meant to do that. Genesis 32, Jacob, right, wrestles with God. And then in Judges 13, we have this Manoah who sees God and lives. And all these are interactions with the angel of the Lord. So that leads me to believe that the angel of the Lord is indeed a celestial being that can manifest materially as a man so as to wrestle another man. Because someone remind me, doesn't the angel that Jacob is wrestling, doesn't it do something really bad? Like it does something to his hip, takes his hip out of joint. That must have been so painful. But what's the significance of that scripturally, thematically? What does that mean that the angel injured Jacob's hip? I mean, I guess the hip helps you walk. And if it puts a little limp in Jacob's step, is there some significance to that? You know, does that just speak to the fact that there's a certain, I don't know, obstinance to Jacob? I don't get it. And what's your take on Jacob wrestling God? Was that supposed to happen? Did Jacob need to wrestle this angel of the Lord? Did that need to happen? Could it have been a bit more polite? It seems to be indicative of the relationship of the nation of Israel with God, doesn't it? The fact that one of the patriarchs fought God, it's kind of an indictment on the character of the Israelites. It's like, guys, you got to chill because you're fighting God and that's throwing your hip out. Yeah, I guess that makes sense to me. Probably makes sense to you guys as well. Let's see. The reference Samson's parents say they have, yeah. That's what preterism is. It means past fulfilled. Touches it with the Jews no longer are tending meat anymore. Jacob was about to fight a giant army and God took out their general right before the battle. It means to rely on him. I remember that sequence where Jacob was about to fight a giant arm. This massive arm came out of the ground, and Jacob's like, "God help!" No, I know what you're saying. Guys, I think we've had a lot of fun with that. Let's move on to the next topic, right? Let's move on to this. I think we solved this, guys. The stew's been cooked, and all we got from it was the amazing lesson that God does have a sense of humor. He showed us that. Showed us that live. We have the whole idea of saints and sinners, of attaining a crown from God and not man, and how being deceived by the songs of fools and by asshat friends can accentuate the sinful and psychotic tendencies of man, and how that selfishness can play out in things like Numbers 22 with Balaam. We see up here in Judges, Genesis 16 and 32, how human beings have had encounters with God via the angel of the Lord. And I guess that kind of reminds me of the scripture that says to be hospitable, because you don't know. You might be entertaining an angel. What do you think about that scripture that talks about entertaining angels? Is it talking about human beings who are just doing the work of God? Or what? What do you think? Revelation. Revelation. Was it Martin Luther that didn't want revelation in the canon of the Protestant Bible? Did he find it problematic? I think I remember that from somewhere. I messed up a sign into that day Israel wouldn't eat that muscle of an animal. Interesting. Jackie says they were at Walmart. Alrighty. Who knows if Martin Luther liked it or not? I'm just putting it up there just in case. But he might have had thoughts about it. Accepting it is done. Acceptance of accomplishment, right? So what does it rely on? Well, it relies on you being malleable. You need some kind of flexibility. It depends on your conditioning. Mentally. Lots of people in faith can be very brittle. And if you try and get them to accept that revelation has been complete, they'll snap at you because they don't have the flexibility. In order to gain the flexibility, you need intellectual altitude. And the only way you get intellectual altitude is freedom to think. And the only way you get the freedom to think is to escape persecution, both internal and external. So if you judge yourself, if you've had psychological tripwires set up through your conditioning, then you're going to have that internal judgment whenever you try to seek the intellectual altitude necessary to think. However, if you can escape the persecution of the internal, get away from those people who accuse you of potentially being heretical and want to alienate you from their congregations, you're better off away from that stuff sometimes. I don't advise looking for that kind of trouble. If you can just do it in your own sequestered personal time, fair play to you. Some people might need to escape that threat that looms over them, like the sword of Damocles. If you can get that intellectual altitude, then you get yourself into a disposition. What I find is you're not winning this debate on logic and reason. You can win this debate with logic and reason. It is possible to do so. I think it was the reasonableness, what Don Preston would call explanatory power. That was what kind of moved me to see the fulfillment of revelation. But I don't think that's always going to win you the argument, because I have shown people the reasonable arguments that moved me towards preterism, and have been rejected. And it would be rude and prejudiced of me to believe that, it's because I'm smarter somehow. That's why those arguments were so reasonable to me. It's because I was smart enough to comprehend them, and that person over there is an asshat, and they don't get it because they're an asshat. I think that would be too proud. I think instead it's because the argument has to be won here in spirit. I think it's a bit more subtle than just the intellectual stuff. Let's see what we're saying in the chat, guys. I will work this out better in the future, guys. This is the first time we're doing one of these live, so I really appreciate your patience hanging out with me today. Let's go. Jonathan. Revelation is like the final boss of Bible books. That is the perfect way to describe it, man. Required says that was after the new covenant started. So my take is that all Christians are priests and messengers of God. So during that time of turmoil, it was more unclear. And that's a beautiful sentiment to share, the fact that they were priests and messengers of God. Grady says, isn't it funny that the revelation of Yeshua as the victorious Messiah is the one book and letter in the Bible that nobody thinks has been completed? It's a very interesting thing, isn't it? Very interesting. Many are called, but few will find it. I've never heard the term intellectual altitude. Dude, that's why I said it, because it sounds so good. I will do this a lot in live streams. I like to produce coin phrases, little neologisms, little portmanteaus, little things. I like to come up with words. The problem with Revelation is just like the Jews, that the Messiah wasn't the king they wanted. And in Revelation, the end and the freedom that we have in Yeshua isn't what most people desire. Man, Grady, you're so wise. The conditioning is hard to overcome. I gave him a quarter and I turned around and he was gone. That night, my daughter called me from a different city, and her first words were, "There are angels in Walmart." I love that. You know, sometimes there might be an angel in Walmart. You've got to be receptive to it. Agreed, it's not smarts, it's willingness to consider something new. For me, though, it was easy because my dad is preterist, so really, I'm probably no better in any way than the non-preterists. Jonathan, that is a bloody beautiful thing to share. It's not the words, it's the sentiment. What you just shared there was absolutely gorgeous. And isn't it funny that the revelation of Yeshua as the victorious Messiah isn't the one book that nobody thinks was completed? That's the thing I want to come back to. Oh, yeah, and the fact he's a king. So Christus Rex. Christ is king. Christ is king. Christ is king. But people will say, Lord, Lord. You know, not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, truly has the disposition of heart that demonstrates allegiance to the Messiah. You can chant the words Christ is king, but what the hell are you doing? Why are you doing it? Are you doing it because you've been triggered? Are you doing it because you feel someone on the other side of the fence is antagonizing you? So you're going to shout the words Christ is king at them? What have you turned into? What have you become? Have you lost yourself in some way? Are you buying into a haze, a miasma of fury? Don't do that to yourself. Don't do that to yourself. He's not the king they expected, okay? I like that idea of the expected king. And the irony is, a lot of people that would shout Christ is king, who I would consider to be brothers and sisters, but they have a false idea of what fulfillment means. They're not full preterists. And, you know, you touch on something really important there. That deception, that love of the lie that puts us into darkness, that's full of the sound of gnashing teeth, angry people shouting angry slogans at one another. And like you said, Jonathan, these people have lost that humility that you've demonstrated when you said, you know, these people, it's not that I'm so smart, it's not that I'm so great. It's just that I had the gift of the circumstances that I found myself in. And I think what you're demonstrating there, Jonathan, and what you're touching on too, Grady, is the gratitude that defines a Christian, and the grace and the decorum. That's the fruit of the Spirit, isn't it? That's the fruit of the Spirit. So I think there's something to be said there about expectation, and how the songs, the memes, and I like the terminology of memes. I wrote a little bit about that in the book, because a meme is a unit of cultural data, a unit of cultural knowledge that's replicated through generations because it has something potent and rich within it, and it's seen to be or believed to be cherished and important. So that idea is replicated through the generations. And you'll notice that there's a timeline that plays out in the history of Christianity in the West. And I think, it won't take a lot for you to piece together what happened on this timeline. There's the timeline. Let's put some dates on the board. Yeah. 2000. So, I would say this is my experience from speaking to my grandparents and stuff like that. I don't know, 1918, stuff like that. Christianity was quite a big feature in British culture. And then you hit World War I, and it's like, okay, I maybe that was a bit dodgy. And it kind of floats by until you get to the end of World War II, and it sank down here. The Battle of the Somme, the Unit 714, whatever it was in Japan, it did all those terrible experiments, having to drop 2 nuclear bombs on them, and the Holocaust, etc. I think people started to, because most people are what the internet culture refers to as normies, and it's a colloquialism that means normal, average Joes. Not many people are going to be as invested in theology and invested in the truth and in these sort of matters, because they're differently inclined. They've got different traits. They've got different environmental pressures. They're not contemplating these things. It's not as prescient on their minds. However, most people are like that. They don't have this all going on in their heads. They're just normal, average people. So when their confidence is hit so strongly, like it was after World War I and World War II, they started to get the sense that maybe God didn't care, because they saw so many of the brothers and sisters killed in a nasty conflict. And I don't think religion really recovered from this. It kind of did. I'd say it halved. I'd say it halved at that point. And then anybody that preserved their faith, well, their children were not as invested, especially in Protestantism. Catholic women, matriarchs, tend to but replicate the faiths of Christianity stronger than any other group. Well, it depends on the sect. I'd say Mormons do the best in terms of retention of numbers. However, between Catholics and Protestants are a bit more secular in their dispositions. They're a bit more open and free. Catholics tend to have a bit more of a homogenous culture, and it just seems to be that the women in families, at least in Scotland, kept the family unit invested in the church. So when all these older women passed away, numbers would take a little bit of a hit. Religious mobility is tending away from church membership. And so the generations that grew up after, I would say, 1950, with World War II parents, didn't tend to go to church as much. And then these numbers just kept dwindling until going to church was just not all that common. That's the United Kingdom's story. I know it's different in the USA. There's still quite a vibrant Christian scene, depending on the state. But that's what I see. And part of that speaks to the lack of investment and interest in UK in preterism and scripture. I had a good friend. I still went to church in the year 2000. I was only 11 years old in the year 2000. And my best friend at the time grew up in a crazy household. And that guy had hard drugs in his pockets when he was 8 years old. And he said to me, look, Jesus is supposed to come back in the year 2000 and he hasn't. Therefore, Christ isn't real. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. And it took away the faith of that child because Christianity told him the witness, the testimony, all hinges on this year 2000 or 2025 or 2050, this future fulfillment. Well, it didn't come. And so my friend Graham never believed. Let's see, we got Simon in the chat. Good to see you, Simon. Revelation was not the last book. John's Gospel is witness to Revelation that Jesus fulfilled Daniel as the Christ. Cool. Preterists theorize about how what the Bible says is true came to pass. Non-preterists theorize about why it didn't. It's a very powerful piece of rhetoric right there, my good friend. I like that, the gift of circumstance. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I think that the book of Revelation should be right after John's Gospel in his Sermon on the Mount, his version of the other three Gospels, and most of the events were happening about to crescendo. Yeah, I like that term. Revelation written shortly come to pass. John's Gospel has passed. Interesting stuff, Simon. That would be in the category of already happened, all back and forth there. And then very sad. Yeah, history has played out in such a way that it's injured the faith of some people because, again, it comes back to what this over here, expected king. All those soldiers in World War II never had that expected king. And indeed, during the persecution of the Jews in Germany and etc., there was some Christian buzz about the end of days. And there was that expectancy that, hey, perhaps we're in the end times here and Christ is about to come. So these people were still disorientated at this point. And what we see, the reason World War II happened, if I may be so bold as to say, is because the world wasn't full preterist. Guys, let's put it up top. Full preterism. Prevents war. WW1 and WW2. Is that true? We will never know, but I'm going to say it confidently. The international foreign relations between nations would have a completely different texture, tone, culture if full preterism was embraced, because the implications of full preterism put power in the people. And it says, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you have within you the power of God to influence this world for the better, because the victory of Christ has come and he is alive and he is residing inside you. He is the light within you. He is the temple. And that sun that comes, that light that comes from the Father and the Son never sets. You walk around with human beings who believe that, then perhaps the whole situation with Franz Ferdinand doesn't play out to kick off World War I. We don't have a Treaty of Versailles that screws the Germans, and then Adolf Hitler doesn't get pissy and think, I'm going to exterminate the Jews and the communists and the liberals who have torn down the German economy. You put full preterism in the hearts of people, which is just to say spirit and truth in the hearts of people. I'm equating preterism with spirit and truth, guys. This is good marketing. You do that, and you extinguish the fury and the flame and the tension, right? You take that out of the equation. This foolishness, this petty player that struts and frets his time upon the stage and then is no more. Out, brief candle. Life is but a petty player. It's a little bit of Shakespeare there for you guys. A little bit of Shakespeare. All right, let's see what we're saying in the chat now. Oh, yeah. Lots of stuff has been done with the idea of ushering in the last days. Tried to force God's hand. Yeah, man. That's just horrible that men try to do this. Dean says, immanentizing the eschaton, immanentizing the eschaton. Dude, having a Scottish accent is like a disability. I guess I might be out of place. No, man, you did some good work there. It wasn't time for preterism to be revealed. Jackie, how dare you? No, Jackie, that's amazing. It wasn't time for preterism to be revealed. Chat, get her. No, I just want everybody to chime in on what Jackie just said, because you done blown my minds, right? Let's put it on the board. Wasn't time for Pret reveal. Jackie, take the microphone, please. I want to hear more about this. Guys, we have been through the centuries. 1314, the Battle of Bannockburn, William Wallace fighting against the English for the independence of Scotland, ultimately getting captured and killed, and Robert the Bruce taking up the throne as guardian of King, really. I think Wallace was the guardian. King Robert the Bruce. You know, all these people were French. They don't tell you that in history, do they? Like, they were all from North France. They were Normans, aristocrats. I think they might have had some heritage, but they were landowners, you know. Even the name Wallace, you may not know this, William Wallace. Wallace means Welshman, right? So it's like, that's our guy, William Wallace. But Mel Gibson did a good movie about it, so we'll take it. I mean, he wasn't Welsh. He was born in Scotland, but, you know, it's an interesting ancestry for that gentleman. And Robert de Bruce. But you got all this history, guys. Preterism is just not getting heard. It's not getting heard for thousands of freaking years. And humanity seems disorientated and lost. And then at some point we get to these world wars where there's mass industrial death and destruction. It's almost like God allowed man's deprived heart to take the steering wheel at this point. And we wrapped ourselves round a tree at 80 miles an hour. And then we crawled out of that scrap and tried to build ourselves up. And we did. We modernized the world through ingenuity, through depression, and the damn desire to make life a little bit easier for ourselves. And we hurt a lot of people in the process, but we ended up manufacturing powerful, beautiful, efficiency-driving machines. You know, we got automobiles from Henry Ford. We got the light bulb from Benjamin Button. That's not the right guy. We got the light bulb from that guy that you Americans love. We got the television from John Logie Baird, who is half Scottish, half American. We got telephone from Alexander Graham Bell, who was Scottish, but maybe an Italian came up with the concept before him, but we don't talk about that. You know, we got penicillin from Fleming. He was a Scotsman. Basically, the Scottish came in and modernized the world. Right? The American Navy, that was a Scotsman. That was a Scotsman too. So the Declaration of Independence, based on the